live for another webinar series, A Day in the Life of. Welcome everyone who has joined us this afternoon. We are very, very excited to talk to Mariska. Mariska is a chartered accountant. Welcome, Mariska, to our webinar series.
Thanks everyone, excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a really, really cool conversation. We've received quite a few questions already. There's lots of kids that really want to know exactly what it is to be a chartered accountant. So let's get started. We don't have a lot of time. Half an hour goes really, really quickly when you're having a good conversation. So let's start right at the beginning, Mariska. What did you study to become a chartered accountant?
So basically, I took a little bit of a longer route than the traditional route. The traditional route is basically just going straight from varsity into what they call BAC, which stands for B Accounting. And that's normally a 3-year degree. And then thereafter, it's 1 year of honors and then 3 years of articles. However, I took a little bit of a longer route. I decided to do BAC LLB, and that's basically a combination of accounting and law simultaneously. So instead of 3 years, it's a 5-year degree. However, I was one of the people that took a little bit longer. It took me 6 years to complete my 5-year degree. And then, unfortunately for me also, I redid my honors 3 times. So I'm one of those people who are very persistent and got it done. So it took me a little bit longer, but eventually completed everything. And then also to become a CA after your articles, once during your articles, and the other one a little bit later, 18 months later. There's 2 CA exams that you also need to write. So luckily I got both of those done first time around. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, so I have like 700 questions for you already, but let's start at the one that pops to my head first. Why did you choose to do the longer route, Mariska? Why the BAC and the LLB?
Absolutely. So if everyone knows nowadays, when you're in business, there's always some other form of agreement. Always legal agreements everywhere involved. So the LLB part just makes you think a little bit different. It just sets you apart above the average CA, because let's face it, nowadays there's a million CAs all around. So basically the LLB just gives me that little bit of a top notch, to put it that way. So that's why I decided it's a little bit more difficult, but a little bit longer, and definitely worthwhile.
Okay, I am curious though, were you ever inspired to simply choose the attorney or the advocate route, or was the mind always set on becoming a chartered accountant?
So ever since I was in primary school, I've always wanted to become a CA. And then when I had to decide, because it's a course where they have to select a handful to go and do the course, I didn't have second or third options. So when I was paging a little booklet of varsity, I saw, oh my word, there's something else. And I was quite fascinated with the combination.
Yeah.
And then I decided to rather go for that route. I must say, during about my 3rd year while I was studying, I was contemplating, because I realized I actually enjoyed the law more, but I already signed a bursary to become a CA. So I was just like, push through, get it done. So that's basically why. And also I thought
Okay, that's cool. You spoke about there being 2 exams to qualify as a CA. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about those exams.
Sure. So straight after you've done your honors, you have to write what they call the first test. I think it's now called ITC, if I remember correctly, Initial Test of Competence. So that's basically testing your technical knowledge, just to make sure that you comply with CICAS, setting the standard of CA. Your second test, which they call the APC, is written 18 months into your articles. So that's basically testing your practical experience. So you need to pass both those exams to be qualifying as a CA at CICA.
Okay, all right, that's quite a process. Shoo. What about your articles? What was your experience like doing your articles?
My articles I did at Mazars, Cape Town. It's not one of your typical big five audit firms or big three. Let's call it big three. So they're a little bit in the medium term. Not one of the smallest ones, but I quite enjoyed it. The practical experience was much better than the technical experience, not just studying. So that was quite enjoyable. They do make you work very hard. So be mindful of that. It's like almost, I wanted to say, cheap labor. So they make
Yeah.
sure they get the best out of you. But it's quite enjoyable. You get exposure into various kinds of clients. So yeah, quite enjoyable. 3 years.
Okay, that's interesting. You also mentioned something about a bursary. So I know a lot of my audience members would be very, very curious about that. I was going to touch on this later in our conversation, but I might as well bring it up now. Are these bursaries like few and far apart? Or where could students who are interested in or looking for a bursary sort of go? Directly to companies via the university? How do they work?
Well, you can go about it more than one way. One of the ways that I did was straight from school already. I was searching the internet wide where I could find a bursary. So I applied everywhere that I could apply. Specifically, nowadays, I've seen the companies, the audit firms, all of them, they advertise it like 3 years in advance already before you start doing your articles. So you can start applying now already at all the audit firms directly. Also, normally at the varsities, they also have a little bursary department where they have a little booklet that provide you with all the detailed information. So you can also ask the admin guys at the varsity also to provide you with some other booklet, which they also have all of this available.
Oh, all right. That's so great to hear that there are many avenues for students. And you know what's interesting is they don't often know this. So audience members, you now have information and it's valuable information. All right, so Mariska, tell me, what is a day like in your life as a chartered accountant?
So, firstly, a chartered accountant, normally it's very stereotyped in specifically that people think you only do a company's books or you're only financial manager. But if you know what a CA stands for, it basically means that you can do basically anything. It's not just specifically one thing. So it depends on what avenue you go about. You can do tax advice, you can do financial management, you can basically be an entrepreneur, start your own company, you can do consulting. There's various aspects of just being a CA. A typical day, however, in my life, currently my job is at a private equity firm. We provide advisory services to a family office. So in my typical day, I deal with tax consultants who file foreign tax returns. I deal with family office queries. I prepare board packs. I deal with the auditors. There's lots of various aspects. My husband normally tells me he has no idea what I'm doing because I'm doing pretty much everything. And that's the way how it is in finance. You basically need to resolve everyone's questions, issues, whether it's operational, relating to accounting. And let's face it, everything in accounting or in finance, everything needs to get paid. So there's lots to do every single day. So it's basically solving problems.
Solving problems. Okay, cool. So, as a personality, and this is one of the questions I've received from the audience. And the question is, what personalities are best suited for a CA? But I'm thinking essentially you need to be someone who enjoys solving puzzles.
Well, basically, yes. There's a few specific characteristics, and if you're thinking about accounting in specific, you need to be detail orientated because if you miss some other digit somewhere, it's going to be an issue. You also need to be trustworthy because you're working with someone else's money. Highly organized because there's so many various aspects that you deal with. You need to be flexible because never ever things work out the way you expect it to. You need to be able to sort out your priorities, what to do first, what second. You need to be able to work with people because you work with people daily. You need to be able to work in a team, so be collaborative, a great communicator, and then once again, be creative because sometimes you need to resolve problems in a very creative way. So I think
Yeah.
that's a few of the characteristics, yes.
It's always so great to hear. Yes, you do have to get the qualification, but the importance of actually having these soft skills and the ability to communicate with people. I think this is something that people sort of not disregard, but overlook slightly when it comes to career choices. But you have to still, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you need to be able to talk to people, communicate your ideas, and listen to what it is that they have to say. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so relating to that, I have a question from one of the audience members who would like to know what your likes and dislikes are of your job.
So I quite like enjoying working with people and managing people. I'm very strict. I also want to say I'm always very relatable and making sure that I'm fair. One of the things I don't like would be repetitive things like reviewing management accounts, reviewing tax calcs, submitting VAT every single month. That's very repetitive. So I quite enjoy picking up the phone, sorting out a problem very quick and easy, and building relationships in order to get that done. So I'd say that's what I enjoy most.
Okay, all right, that's very cool. I appreciate that. The not the repetitive thing. I that's not for me. Hey, there's got to be a little bit of excitement. What about the travel opportunities? It's always interesting for me. The students always want to know this. And I think they're curious, especially with you, because with some degrees, we do know that they don't necessarily translate to other countries. What's the situation with chartered accountancy?
So once again, it depends for what kind of firm you are working for. The previous firm that I worked for was a property developer. So they mainly, basically my traveling was limited to visiting property centers. So that was it. However, if you work at a bigger firm which has international exposure, you always get the opportunity to travel, specifically to specific things. Like, for instance, I've actually been to Luxembourg within my second year of the company that I'm working for now, because we have administrators in Luxembourg. I deal with the tax advisors there, I deal with the audit team there, I deal with the administrators. And at that specific stage, I had to go and help the administrators to understand how everything works. We also have entities in Mauritius, so there's always the opportunity to go to Mauritius for me as well. And then our other family office branch is situated in the Isle of Man, so there might also be the opportunity there. But once again, it depends on what company you're working for. Also, I'm working from home in Cape Town. My office is in Joburg, so I travel there quite often to go and visit the office. So that's basically what my travel exposure is.
Oh wow. I'm curious though, and please correct me if I'm mistaken you, because that's very much could be the case. There are regulatory bodies that sort of govern the chartered accountancy world, if I could just put it simplistically. So if you're talking about opportunities to go overseas, like in Luxembourg, Isle of Man, so on and so forth, as a chartered accountant, does that mean that you need to learn about the regulatory bodies of the different countries?
So basically, the regulatory body that the CA needs to, it's basically what they are regulated against. In South Africa, it's called SAICA.
Yeah.
However, if sometimes some of the article firms where you go an article also offer you in your third year the opportunity to go and do some of your articles overseas at one of their branches or one of their subsidiaries or affiliated companies, etc. So
Yeah.
that's also a very nice thing to do in your articles. Unfortunately, I didn't get that opportunity, but that's always nice to go and do that. Once again, a reminder that in South Africa specifically, we need to comply with IFRS when there's specific audit standards. IRBA also guides us there. Overseas, it depends what specific area you go into. If it's Europe, there's normally either IFRS once again, or they'll be using, for instance, in Luxembourg, one of my entities, or LuxGARP, which is a little bit different. It's very closely related to IFRS, so it's super quick and easy to pick it up. And
Yeah.
in the US, there's also US GARP. So US GARP is much more straightforward than IFRS. So basically, during your articles and while you're studying, you use IFRS. So that's the most difficult one. So the other ones, very quick and easy to pick up. So no need to worry about that.
Okay, so different regulatory boards. We talk SICA and SICA articles here in South Africa. If a student has pursued their degree in South Africa and completed their articles in South Africa, if they decide to move overseas, would they have to redo the process like they have to do with law? Then you've got to study the law in the different country, or can you actually transfer your degree over?
You can basically just straight over transfer your degree over. I think South Africa is one of the most difficult countries to become a CA. It takes at minimum 7 years, as I've explained earlier. Overseas, it's much easier. I think it normally takes 3-4 years max overseas to become a CA. So they are more than willing to accept the CA's degrees as is.
That is so great to hear. I mean, no one wants to go through that whole process again.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So I have a question from the audience, and I was waiting for this one. Are the board exams as difficult as they say there is? So before you respond to that, I've heard a story, and I don't know how far it's true. Is it, when you're answering on the difficulty level, is it true if you fail one exam, you have to redo all of them and pass them all one time?
So firstly, you don't need to redo all of them and pass them all one time.
Excellent.
Just to make that clear.
Yeah.
The test itself, I would say, if you can pass your honors, there's no way that you can't pass the board one exam, which is the ITC exam, first time around. They're basically on the same level. So I believe if you can pass honors, that's basically, if you're done with that, you are fine. I think honors is the most difficult one. The APC test is more practical. So that one was, for me, in any case, fairly easy. Yeah, so I'm not sure, but sometimes some people struggle. It depends on your practical experience. Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about honors. Obviously you've got your undergrad, your postgrad, so on and so forth. And this is a question we get often. Like, in some industries or in some professions, it is beneficial for an individual to pursue their masters. In your industry, do you think it's beneficial if you want to be a practicing chartered accountant to pursue your masters?
I've wondered about that myself, and per my investigations, it's not necessary to have any masters of any kind. I think if you want to be more specialized in terms of, let's say, tax, and if you want to go into the tax route specifically, then it might be beneficial to do a master's in tax or even international tax. I've recently considered doing international and international tax, but that's a more specialized field. So it depends on what you want to go into. If you want to go into tax consulting, it would make sense. But I, for instance, have a colleague who has a master's in tax. She doesn't earn more than I do. She doesn't do anything different than what I do. So yeah, I don't think it's necessary to have that when being a CA.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's really dependent on what like sort of like you said, in how do you want to specialize, and is there a need for a master's? The questions are flowing in now with regard to SICA articles, so I'm just going to deal with some of them here. So one of the questions that's sort of popping up as a perfect introductory point is, so now, you have a student, they finished their degree, and it's time that they start looking for a firm that they should do their articles. How should a student, let's say they've now gotten the interview, right? How can they prepare for the interview? Like, what is the interviewer going to be looking for?
Once again, I remember when I started looking for a firm to go and do my articles at, I remember I had like 11 interviews during 1 week, if I remember correctly. And basically all of them ask the same type of question. So if you go online and you Google, you'll get more or less a list of normal questions they would ask. For instance, Are you done with your studies? That's basically the main concern they have. Are you done with your honors? That's one of the tick boxes that they normally do. They do take a look at your results that you got in your final year, and obviously on your honors as well. So it depends, once again, if you're going for one of the big three audit firms or medium tiered one, if they are looking at that. They also get a gauge for your personality. So I always say the more confident you are, the better chance you have of achieving a spot for your articles. So that's basically the two main things that I can guide you with. Otherwise, Google is your friend. Go and look at the audit firm, go and look at their background. It's always good to know what that audit firm specifically stands for. So that's basically how I went about it.
Yeah. I also find it's really important to sort of like LinkedIn stalk your interviewers. There's no harm in knowing a little bit about them, you know?
Absolutely.
So Mariska, degree, yes, check. Honors, definitely preferred if you want to pursue a profession as a chartered accountant. Personality, very important. Communication, and so on and so forth. Would it be beneficial if, how do I phrase this? A student who has pursued a lot of extracurricular, let's say there's a student who's pursued a lot of extracurricular activities, but has okay grades, where would they fall in terms of being chosen or not?
I think once again, to get into one of the top three, they are very strict about grades. So that's also one of the reasons why I felt to go more into the medium tiered one. So I've gotten a few options there, but I decided on the one that I felt more fitting to me specifically. And I obviously had a lot of extracurricular stuff on my CV that I could present them with. So once again, you need to gauge where you want to fit in. If you want to only be technical staff, only in financial services, then I'd say high grades, top three, that would be your place where you would fit in. Otherwise, I'd say medium tiered firms, normally they are frowned upon, but I can promise you it's not the case nowadays anymore. They take a look holistically at who you are as a person. And definitely some of the smaller firms, if I can call them that, have now also started integrating with firms in different jurisdiction in South Africa specifically. So they work together, even though they're a small firm. For instance, I know specifically about one in Stellenbosch. They've also merged with one in Pretoria. So don't look down on the smaller firms. So maybe just also mentioning that as well.
Okay, cool. What about a scenario? Okay, so I'm a well-rounded student, you know, and I've got all of the soft skills at the honors level. At first, I don't take it so seriously, and perhaps I need a redo. But then I really pull up my socks and I get the grades. The fact that I perhaps failed my honors the first time, would it be held against me at the interview stage if I've then now proven that my grades have improved when I redo my honors?
It's a very good question, and I'm a very good example. I redid my honors 3-4 times before I passed it. It hasn't held me back at all. So once again, you must just be very confident in your abilities and convince the interviewer that, listen here, these are the reasons, or this is how life happened to me specifically, and these are the reasons why this happened. You can clearly see that I've pulled up my socks. I've did what I had to do, and I don't think it's going to be an issue. But once again, confidence, confidence, confidence. You need to make sure they understand why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just own it. You know, sometimes
Absolutely.
life happens, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the student has done the degree, done the articles, and gotten the job. I know that you're not always offered the job at the firm where you do your articles, but what advice would you give to the graduate now transitioning from articles into working?
Firstly, having technical knowledge, or let's call it book knowledge, is not the same as practical experience. So it's a little bit different when you are on the other side of the audit, because let's face it, during your articles you are on the auditing side. So normally you are requesting the information, etc., etc. Now you're on the other side all of a sudden. Now you need to start prepare all the information. It definitely helps because you were in audit, you know exactly what they're going to ask for. So it definitely makes a very big difference. Just one thing to mention, that when you are auditing, you normally look at what they call materiality. When you are now on the other side, there's no such thing as materiality. You need to make sure that your bank balances recons and all of that. So there's nothing as materiality. So you can't just ignore the small mistakes. You need to make sure that it's fixed. And also, once again, you are now the one that needs to present all the information to the auditors, and you need to make sure that your financials are correct, etc. So it's definitely difficult. I enjoyed it a lot more than my articles. So yeah, that's my point on it.
Okay, and I've heard these audits are quite intense. It's down to the cent. I mean, there's no saying, oh no, but it's small. It's you've got to account for every single bit, even the cents of the client. Is this factual?
Well, if you are on the practical side, so let's, for instance, in my situation when I'm a financial manager, yes. If you're on the auditing side, they have what they call clearly trivial or immaterial. So then they don't look at the, let's call it the cents or the whatever.
Yeah.
So that's basically where the difference lies. Yeah.
So we're almost out of time, but I have many questions, so I'm just going to try and get as much in as possible. Mariska, this is one that always ties in sort of with the theme of what advice do you have for students and graduates of the audience moving forward. But the way it's been worded in one of the questions here is very interesting. So I'm going to pose this question to you, and it's, what advice would you give your younger self, prior to you starting all of this?
So my advice to myself would be to shorten my studies, because let's call it, I was a little bit lazy while I was doing my honors, even though there's a lot of personal things, major things that also happened in my life, which caused me to redo my honors quite a few times. So if I could redo that, I would put all the, let's call it, personal issues aside and focus on my studies to get it done as quickly as possible, and get into the practical side of things a lot quicker. One of the things where I was lacking also, and the reasons why I had to redo my honors quite a couple of times, is exam technique. Doesn't necessarily mean you don't have the knowledge. It's basically just practicing your exam technique. So one of my lecturers, she helped me to prepare more with the exam technique. And that helped quite a lot. So I practiced working out more papers, and that's how I picked up my grades after struggling quite a bit. So also working under pressure and time limits, working under that also helps significantly.
Okay, all right, that's great advice. I like that. It's practical, it's objective. The students can actually carry that forward. So future looking now, what now for you yourself?
So I'm obviously now been a couple of years into practice, and let's call it the industry. So if I can just relook at what I've asked in my performance meeting end of last year, one of the things that I'm striving towards now is, if I want to start having children, I would like to, let's call it, move up, not necessarily in title, but more in the lines of maybe becoming a director, freeing up some time, moving responsibility, not necessarily from myself, because at the end of the day, I'm still responsible, but what they call the workers, letting someone, let's call it, below me, but not necessarily below me, because we outsource most of our stuff. But
okay, all right, that's very cool. And as always, I've run out of time. I think we really need to think about making these sessions a little bit longer. I need to cut this short, Mariska. If there are further questions from the audience members, I'll forward them to you on an email, I'm sure. There's so much I haven't gotten to, but I just want to take this opportunity to thank you so much. You've been such a great speaker, and I feel like I've learned so much from you. So I know that my audience members have definitely learned a lot too. And we hope you have a lovely evening this Monday.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And once again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let me know. More than happy to.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mariska.
Thank you, everyone. Keep well.
Bye.
Bye.